Champagne dripped down my face, catching the light from the chandeliers like liquid gold. Around me, 200 wedding guests froze mid-laughter, their smiles dissolving into a stunned, collective silence. My daughter's new husband, Preston Hayes, stood before me, smug grin plastered across his face, the kind of grin a man wears when he believes the world belongs to him. Moments ago, he'd raised a crystal flute and, with a cruel smirk, poured expensive champagne over my head. The crowd gasped, and the string quartet faltered mid-note. He told everyone I was just a pathetic janitor who didn't belong among real people. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man he just humiliated had been secretly paying his medical school bills for 4 years. Every tuition payment, every lab fee, every shining white coat he ever wore was bought with the life insurance money from my late wife, Margaret. I stood there, motionless, champagne still dripping onto the parquet floor. My hands didn't tremble, my jaw didn't clench. I simply reached for my phone, and in that moment, I realized something chilling. One call could destroy everything Preston Hayes had ever built. This is the story of how kindness met entitlement, and how the quiet man in the corner turned out to hold all the power. Soft, ominous piano fades, and the trouble began the moment I stepped through the polished glass doors of Riverside Country Club. $15,000 for the venue, all gleaming marble and fresh-cut lilies. I knew the cost because Sarah, my daughter, had shown me the contract weeks before, wringing her hands about the expense. I told her not to worry, that her happiness was worth more than any number on a page. What I didn't tell her was that $15,000 was exactly 1 month of scholarship payments I'd been making. The valet's eyes darted to my car, a 2018 Honda Civic, 140,000 miles, cracked dashboard, and a faint smell of lemon disinfectant from my shifts at the hospital. "Sir, are you here for the Johnson-Hayes wedding?" he asked, his voice loaded with the kind of politeness that hides disgust. "I'm the bride's father," I said. His face went crimson. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Johnson. Right this way, sir." Inside, the air was thick with perfume and privilege. The coat-check girl hesitated before touching my jacket, a clean $29 purchase from Target. She pinched the fabric like it might stain her hands. I caught my reflection in a gilded mirror, hair graying at the temples, eyes tired but steady. My suit wasn't fancy, but it was pressed, clean, and honest. That's more than I could say for the people here. Then came Dr. Hayes, Preston's father, gliding over with that rehearsed smile doctors use before delivering bad news. "Eddie, so glad you could make it." His handshake was firm, too firm, as if trying to measure my worth through bone pressure. "You must be so proud. Medical school, residency at Johns Hopkins, Preston's really made something of himself." "He sure has," I said quietly. If only he knew. For 4 years, I'd tracked Preston's progress through the anonymous scholarship I'd set up in Margaret's name, GPA 3.8, clinical assessments glowing. Every report sent directly to my inbox, the invisible hand guiding his future. Nearby, the groomsmen laughed loud enough for me to hear. "Can you believe Sarah's dad is a janitor?" one of them said. "At a children's hospital, no less." Another replied, "Preston must really love her. Love doesn't pay for country club memberships, though." Their laughter cut through me like glass, but I said nothing. I remembered what Margaret used to tell me. You judge a man not by how he treats his equals, but by how he treats those he thinks are beneath him. And right then, I saw exactly what kind of man Preston was. He approached with a champagne smile, that confident swagger only the young and entitled carry. "Eddie, looking sharp," he said, his gaze flicking over my modest suit. "Sarah's upstairs getting ready, nervous but excited. I was just thinking, if you need help getting a better suit, I could." "This one's fine," I cut him off. Of course, he laughed. "Just saying, image matters in medicine, you know? People judge before you even speak." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. "If only you knew, Preston." I looked at him, his Italian silk bow tie, the arrogance in his eyes, and all I saw was a man standing on foundations built by another's sacrifice. Then Sarah appeared. She descended the staircase like a dream, wearing her grandmother's lace wedding gown, the same one Margaret wore 27 years ago. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, I saw my wife, again, radiant, alive, smiling through her daughter's eyes. But Preston's gaze told a different story. His smile wasn't awe, it was ownership. He posed for photos like a man building a brand, not a husband, a product. And when he leaned toward me and whispered, "After tonight, she'll be Mrs. Preston Hayes III, part of a real medical legacy," I felt something inside me fracture. The ceremony passed in a blur, the vows, the laughter, the applause. But during the reception, the mask began to slip. I watched his family's eyes, judgmental, scanning, evaluating every detail about me. At cocktail hour, Preston's aunt whispered, "Such a lovely girl, but her father's a janitor. What will people at the club say?" "Preston knows what he's doing," her husband replied. "Pretty girl, she'll be grateful. Those types always are." Those words burned into me. Those types. I realized then that silence was no longer a kindness, it was permission. Because if I let them treat me like dirt, they'd treat Sarah the same way. I thought of Margaret. I thought of her last days, fighting cancer in that cold hospital room. Preston had been there back then, young, compassionate, holding her hand when I couldn't find words. He'd been kind once. That's why I'd chosen him as the first and only recipient of the Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund. For years, $400,000, every penny of my wife's insurance, her final gift to me. I used it to fund the education of the man who stood before me now, the man pouring champagne over my head. And tonight, that kindness had finally curdled. Sarah came over, eyes wide with concern. "Dad, you okay?" "Just thinking about your mom," I said softly. "She would have loved this. She would have loved Preston, too," Sarah said. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But somewhere, deep down, I knew Margaret would have seen through him from the start. Dinner was served. Toasts began. And when Preston's best man raised his glass, his words sealed everything. Preston is everything a doctor should be. Brilliant, dedicated, and smart enough to choose quality when he sees it. Sarah's lucky to be joining the Hayes family legacy. Lucky to join. Equal, not partner. Lucky. As polite applause rippled through the room, I realized silence wasn't protecting anyone anymore. During dinner, Dr. Hayes leaned toward me. "Eddie, I wanted to thank you personally for raising such a wonderful daughter. She'll adapt beautifully to our world. Country clubs, charity galas, different from what she's used to. Of course, different from what I'm used to." "You mean," I said. He smiled that same surgical smile. Well, yes, your backgrounds. Practical, hard work, the backbone of America. It was the verbal equivalent of patting me on the head. That's when Preston joined us, half drunk on champagne and self-importance. Dad, what are you two talking about? Just your father-in-law's job at the hospital, Dr. Hayes said. Oh, right, Preston chuckled. That's how Sarah and I met. Her dad was mopping the nurse's station. Salt of the earth, right? Laughter around the table. Mine didn't come. I took a slow breath. Preston, can I ask you something? Shoot. How did you pay for medical school? He blinked, thrown off. Scholarships, merit-based, Hayes Excellence. A few academic awards. Family connections help. Family connections, I repeated, quietly. Dr. Hayes beamed. He's brilliant. Youngest in his class. Natural talent. Scholarship committee saw that. What committee? I asked. City National Bank handles the fund, Preston replied, waving dismissively. Anonymous donor. Some rich company, probably. I reached into my jacket pocket, unlocked my phone, and turned the screen. Interesting, I said softly. What do you think this accounts for? He squinted. Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund. His smile faltered. That's a coincidence, right? Johnson's a common name. It is, I said. But so was Margaret Johnson. He froze. Wait, your wife. I nodded once. The blood drained from his face. The scholarship that paid for your education, I said, my voice low and steady. The anonymous donor. That was my wife's life insurance, her final gift. Every penny went to you. Silence swallowed the table. Forks stilled midair. Even Dr. Hayes stopped breathing. You're lying, Preston whispered. Am I? I asked. You remember her, don't you? Room 314, stage 4, lung cancer. His lips trembled. You can't have that kind of money. $400,000, I said. And I spent it all to make sure you became a doctor who remembered compassion. I stood, letting the words hang there like a blade. You called my job something others won't do. But I chose that job, Preston. I chose it because it kept me close to the people trying to save my wife. Because it meant I could serve in my own way. He stared at me, not with arrogance this time, but horror. And I funded your education, I continued, because I thought the man who held my hand in that hospital hallway would never forget where he came from. I raised my glass of cheap, sparkling wine, the kind they'd handed out to the lower tables. Seems I was wrong about a lot of things. Dr. Hayes looked at me, eyes darting. There has to be some mistake, the committee told us. The committee was told to protect donor anonymity, I said calmly. Standard procedure. Preston sat frozen, his face pale, his legacy unraveling before his eyes. Sarah appeared, her gown glimmering under the chandeliers. What's going on? She asked, smiling nervously. You all look like someone died. I turned toward her. The room went still. No one's dead, I said quietly. We were just discussing how much your husband owes to the generosity of strangers. Oh, the Hayes Excellence thing. Dad, isn't it amazing how these programs help deserving students? Sarah's smile was radiant, the picture of a blissful bride, utterly unaware that her words had just detonated a quiet bomb in the center of her own wedding. Deserving. The word slipped through my mind like a shard of glass. Across the table, Dr. Hayes cleared his throat, that polished veneer of upper-class charm faltering just enough to betray unease. Eddie, I think there might be some confusion here. he began carefully. Medical education funding can be complex. Multiple sources, various foundations. I met his gaze steadily. No confusion, doctor. I have all the documentation in my car. That word documentation seemed to linger in the air, sharp and heavy. Around us, the elegant hum of conversation dimmed as champagne flutes paused mid-air. Bank records, scholarship agreements, transfer authorizations. I let the list unravel slowly. Then, with precision, I added, and Margaret's death certificate. The sound of shattering glass snapped through the silence. Preston's hand had gone slack, his champagne flute exploding against the marble floor in a spray of gold and crystal. Heads turned. The surrounding tables leaned in, the scent of roses and expensive perfume thick in the air. Careful, there, son, Dr. Hayes said with a too-wide smile, voice trembling at the edges. Nervous Groom syndrome. His attempt at humor fell flat. A server appeared immediately, kneeling to collect the shards, her movements efficient and practiced. I noticed something as she worked. Both Preston and his father instinctively stepped back, their polished shoes gliding away as if the mere presence of someone on her knees might somehow soil them. It was the same reaction they'd shown me. "Thank you," I said softly to the server. She looked up, startled. Guests like these rarely acknowledged staff. "Just doing my job, sir," she replied. I nodded. "Important work. Keeping everyone safe." The words landed heavier than they should have, and Preston's discomfort flickered across his face, brief but visible. That's when Janet Miller appeared, her warm presence slicing through the tension. "Eddie," she said brightly, wrapping me in a familiar hug. "I didn't know you'd be here tonight. How's retirement treating you?" Preston's head jerked up. "Retirement? Eddie didn't tell you." Janet turned toward the table, her voice full of pride. "After 15 years as head of facilities management, he's finally taking some time for himself. Best director we ever had. The man could run that hospital blindfolded." A murmur rippled around the table. Dr. Hayes blinked. "Facilities director. Oh yes," Janet continued cheerfully. "He managed 43 staff, oversaw a $2 million maintenance budget, and implemented the waste management protocols that saved us $600,000 a year." Silence. Forks lowered. Eyes darted. "Did I say something wrong?" Janet asked, looking from face to face. "No," I said, voice even. "They just assumed I was a janitor." The truth was more complex. I had started as a night janitor years ago, mopping floors, fixing broken fixtures, learning systems others ignored. But I had climbed quietly, steadily, until I ran the place those same people only passed through. Yet somewhere along that climb, people stopped seeing the man who'd earned it. They only saw the one who once pushed a mop. Even Preston, who'd worked in that very hospital for 2 years, had never cared enough to know my nameplate read director. "Well," Janet said with a grin, "retirement suits you, Eddie. Though we do miss having someone who actually cared about the place." She leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Between you and me, the new guy couldn't organize a 2-car parade." As she walked away, a heavy silence settled over the table. Preston's eyes stayed fixed on his folded hands, shame and disbelief wrestling behind his expression. Facilities director, Dr. Hayes, murmured under his breath. $2 million budget. "Still just hospital work," I replied evenly. Still the kind of job your family thinks is beneath them. Preston's voice came out thin. Eddie, I didn't mean, what didn't you mean, Preston? I asked softly. You didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked. You saw what you wanted to see. Sarah's face tightened, her perfect wedding glow fading into confusion. What's going on? She whispered. Why does everyone look so serious? I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. The evening was young, and the reckoning had only begun. Just getting to know each other better, sweetheart. The DJ announced the father-daughter dance. Sarah's face brightened again, her hand slipping into mine, pulling me toward the center of the floor as the first notes of My Girl drifted through the ballroom. The same song Margaret and I had danced to at our wedding decades ago. The same melody that had carried us through every joy, every hardship, every hospital night. We moved slowly under the chandelier's warm glow. I could feel 200 eyes on us, sympathy from some, judgment from others. Sarah's joy was pure, untouched. Dad, this is perfect, she whispered. Mom would have loved this song. She would have loved seeing you this happy. Preston makes me happy too. He's really sweet when it's just us. I hoped she was right. I prayed that the man I'd seen tonight, arrogant, condescending, cruel, was a stranger brought out by champagne and pressure. But Margaret had always said, when people show you who they are, believe them. The song ended, and Preston stepped forward with his polished smile. Mind if I steal her back? She's all yours, I said. But as I turned to leave the dance floor, Preston's hand caught my arm. Eddie, wait, about our conversation earlier. Not here, I murmured. This is Sarah's moment. I just want to clear the air. Sarah looked between us, worry clouding her features. What misunderstanding? Guests began drifting toward the dance floor's edge, curiosity like static in the air. Preston's voice rose, slightly slurred, his confidence loosened by alcohol. There seems to be some confusion about my scholarship funding. My stomach went cold. He wouldn't, Preston, I warned, low and sharp. He ignored me. Eddie claims he funded my medical education through some memorial scholarship, which is obviously impossible. His laugh was brittle, false. Sarah's face drained of color. What are you talking about? Dr. Hayes moved quickly. Son, maybe we should know, Dad. Preston cut him off. This is important. He turned toward the gathering crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to clear up a misunderstanding. My father-in-law's been telling people he paid for my medical school, which is, frankly, ridiculous. The crowd fell still. Gasps fluttered through the air. Preston, stop, Sarah whispered. I earned my scholarship through merit, he continued, his words slicing through the silence. Not charity from a janitor. The word hit like a slap. Even the band stopped playing. Something inside me didn't snap. It cracked, slow and deep, like ice breaking under pressure. Preston, I said quietly, every syllable deliberate. You should stop talking now. Why? He sneered. Because the truth is uncomfortable. He grabbed a champagne flute from a passing tray, lifting it high. Dom Perignon Arling-Isis, $280 a bottle. This reception cost more than most people make in a month. The Hayes family has supported medical education for 3 generations. So let's be honest about who really belongs here. And then he poured it. Cold champagne cascaded over my head, soaking through my cheap suit, trickling down my face, shimmering under the ballroom lights. 200 guests stood frozen. I heard Sarah gasp. I saw Dr. Hayes lower his head in shame. You don't belong here, Preston said clearly, his voice echoing across the hall. You never did. I stood still. I didn't move. Didn't wipe the champagne. Didn't give him what he wanted. I simply reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and unlocked it. Preston, I said softly, you mentioned my scholarship claim was impossible. He smirked. Completely ridiculous. I turned the screen toward the nearest guests. Then explain this. City National Bank. Account balance. $198,247.83. Account name. The Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund. Established May 15, 2019. Initial. Deposit. $400,000. I scrolled slowly, deliberately. Scholarship recipient, Preston Hayes 3. Total disbursements to date, $320,847. Gasps rippled outward like waves. Someone whispered, "What's he showing?" I opened another file, the official PDF from City National. The scholarship agreement gleamed clearly in digital ink, renewable, annually based on academic performance and character assessment, revocable at sole discretion of fund administrator. Preston's complexion turned the color of ash. Fund administrator, I continued quietly, Edward James Johnson. That's me. The ballroom was silent enough to hear ice melt in untouched glasses. The janitor you just humiliated, I said evenly. The man who doesn't belong here. I wiped champagne from my cheek. I've been paying your bills for 4 years. Dr. Hayes choked on a breath. Sarah's sob broke through the stillness. Every tuition payment, every book, every clinic, $320,000 of my wife Margaret's life insurance. I turned my gaze to Preston. Margaret, who died in room 314 at Children's Hospital, the same hospital where you did your residency. The same woman you held my hand for when she died. The room swayed with silence, and for the first time all night, Preston couldn't find a single word to say. Preston's body trembled, as if the truth itself had weight, a crushing, merciless gravity that dragged him toward the marble floor beneath his polished shoes. The glittering chandeliers above cast fractured light over his bowed head, champagne still dripping from my hair, sliding cold against my collar, seeping into the cheap fabric of my jacket. Around us, the grand ballroom, once filled with laughter, music, and clinking glasses, had gone silent. 200 guests stood frozen in their tailored suits and glittering gowns, suspended between horror and disbelief. I could almost hear the pulse of the moment, the hush that follows ruin, as I reached for my briefcase. The soft, metallic click of its latch echoed like a gunshot through the still air. Every head turned. Every breath seemed to pause. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately, not trembling, not anymore. The time for that had passed. These, I said, my voice cutting through the silence, are the original scholarship documents. The manila folder looked ordinary, unremarkable, yet it contained the truth that would dismantle generations of arrogance in a single breath. I held up the papers, their edges catching the golden light. Signed and notarized on May 15, 2019, 3 days after I received Margaret's life insurance payout. Dr. Hayes's composure cracked first. He stepped forward, the confident hospital director, now replaced by a desperate father, his hands trembling as he took the papers. His lips moved, reading silently, eyes darting across the page, disbelief settling over his face like frost. "This can't be right," he muttered. The words of a man watching the foundation of his world tilt beneath him. The scholarship committee told us. The committee was instructed to maintain donor anonymity, I said calmly. Standard protocol for memorial funds. You never asked who the donor was, Doctor. You just assumed it was someone worthy of your respect. Preston snatched the papers from his father's hands, scanning the signatures like a drowning man grasping for air. But the Hayes Excellence Scholarship, his voice cracked. That was the name, the cover name, I interrupted softly. The real one is the Margaret Johnson Memorial Medical Excellence Fund. Every payment, every semester, every single tuition check came from my wife's death benefit. Sarah was crying now, silent tears tracing lines down her makeup. Around us, guests began whispering, fragments of realization spreading like wildfire. Preston's fingers shook as he read his own signature on the agreement, his own words acknowledging terms he'd never bothered to understand. I reached for another folder, my movements slow, methodical, as though performing an autopsy on pride itself. These, I said, opening the second folder, are the bank statements. 4 years of transfers. Every tuition payment, every clinical rotation cost, every cent that kept you afloat. The crowd murmured. Numbers have a way of turning morality into math. September 2020, $47,200. Tuition and fees. January 2021, $18,400. Clinical rotation costs. I turned a page. June 2021, $53,900. Residency supplement. Because hospital salaries don't cover the arrogance of young doctors who've never seen struggle. Someone near the back exhaled sharply. Preston's best man looked sick. Dr. Hayes was rubbing his temples, whispering to himself. I reached for one final page. Do you remember signing this, Preston? He took the paper with trembling hands. That's your annual character assessment form. Question 12. How has this scholarship impacted your understanding of service to others? Preston's lips quivered as he read his own handwriting aloud. This scholarship has taught me that medicine is about serving all people, regardless of their background or social status. I am humbled by the anonymous donor's generosity, his voice faltered, and committed to honoring their sacrifice through compassionate care. The silence that followed was unbearable, heavy, electric. Then Janet Miller pushed through the crowd. Oh my God, she whispered. Eddie, you're the anonymous donor. Gasps rippled through the room. I've processed those payments for years. We never knew who it was. Eddie, this fund has helped 8 medical students. 8. The number lingered like an echo, a reminder that even in grief, something good had grown. Recipients, she continued, must not only demonstrate academic excellence, but also compassion. There's a character clause. Her gaze turned toward Preston. If they show behavior inconsistent with the fund's values, the scholarship can be terminated immediately. Dr. Hayes clutched my arm. Eddie, please, he didn't mean to pour champagne over me. Didn't mean to call me a janitor in front of 200 people. My tone was calm. No, doctor. Your son meant every word. I pulled out my phone again, the blue glow of the screen reflecting in Preston's glassy eyes. I have Marcus Thompson's direct line, the fund administrator. Preston's voice was a whisper now, stripped of all arrogance. What would you tell him? That the recipient publicly humiliated his benefactor, that he failed the character test. The crowd murmured louder now, phones out, cameras recording. Dr. Hayes looked terrified. Eddie, you can't. His career, I said, was built on my wife's death. I tapped the screen again, pulling up a number. $320,847. Deferred. If I withdraw the scholarship, the full balance becomes payable immediately. Preston's knees buckled. Sarah sobbed. The guests began whispering in panic. $343,200, I corrected, with interest and penalties. Eddie, Dr. Hayes begged, this will ruin him. This isn't ruin, doctor. This is consequence. I reached for another folder. Do you remember room 314, Preston? His head snapped up. I opened the file. Children's Hospital, Oncology Wing. Margaret Johnson, my wife. You held her hand during chemotherapy. You comforted her. You cried with me. My voice wavered, the first crack in the dam. She believed in you. That's why I created the fund. Because I thought the young man who helped her die with dignity would honor her memory. I lifted her death certificate, the paper trembling in my hand. She died on March 15th, 2019, and you turned her legacy into a stepping stone for your ego. Preston's tears fell freely now, streaking down his face, mixing with the champagne still glistening on his skin. Eddie, he choked. I remember her. She was brave. She was, I said softly, and she would have been ashamed of this. Dr. Hayes tried again. Eddie, think about Sarah. I am thinking about Sarah. My gaze turned to my daughter, radiant and broken in her wedding gown. What kind of man humiliates her father for sport? What kind of marriage begins with cruelty? I opened my phone again. Marcus Thompson's name gleamed on the screen. I pressed it. The call connected immediately. Marcus, it's Eddie Johnson. I'm invoking the character clause for recipient Preston Hayes, effective immediately. A pause. Eddie, are you sure? I am. Understood, Marcus replied. Termination begins tonight. Payments cease at midnight. The call ended. The silence was deafening. Preston collapsed into a chair, pale and shaking. Dr. Hayes looked destroyed. They'll end his residency, he whispered. Yes, I said quietly. Character review within 48 hours. You know the policy. I handed Preston a card. Dr. Rodriguez, financial counselor, helped another recipient once. Took him 7 years to pay off his debt. What happened to him? Dr. Hayes asked weakly. He learned humility, I said, closing my briefcase with a final click that echoed through the stunned ballroom. Maybe your son will too. And then, without another word, I turned toward the doors, the sound of my footsteps, steady, deliberate, leaving behind the shattered glitter of a wedding that had turned into a reckoning. Behind me, I could still hear the faint echo of Sarah's sob, the sound of love meeting truth, and the quiet collapse of everything built on lies. The ballroom smelled faintly of spilled champagne and fear. Preston Hayes sat slumped in his chair, a man hollowed out by realization. The arrogance that once gleamed in his eyes had vanished, replaced by the unmistakable haze of a man finally sobering not from drink, but from delusion. His voice cracked as he whispered, "What does this mean for us?" The words trembled through the thick, humid silence. I looked at my daughter first, my Sarah, her wedding dress, still luminous, even beneath the harsh light of consequence. That depends, I said quietly, on what kind of man you married. My voice was calm, too calm, the way a storm sometimes stills the air just before the thunder breaks. Preston finally met my gaze. His eyes were glassy, desperate. Eddie, if there's some way to make this right, Preston, I said, soft but certain. The scholarship is gone. That decision is final. He swallowed hard. But if I could prove I've learned from this. Character assessments are now rigorous. Recipients serve in free clinics, volunteer in low-income communities, shadow families in crisis because compassion can't just be written in an essay. It must be lived. Dr. Chen leads the mentorship program now. She tells new recipients, the man who funds your dream knows what it costs to lose one. Sarah visits me every Tuesday. She's seeing someone new, Mike, a high school teacher with kind eyes and calloused hands. When I told him about Margaret, he didn't try to fix the pain. He just said quietly, she sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was, I said. He smiled. This scholarship, it's a beautiful way to keep her alive. It's more than that, I replied. It's a reminder of what respect really means. Preston's name surfaces sometimes in medical journals. His research team recently announced a promising breakthrough in pediatric oncology. He's remarried to a social worker who helps families through medical crises. Maybe, in some quiet way, he's found the man Margaret once believed in. A few weeks ago, I got an envelope from the Riverside Country Club, the wedding venue, a bill for champagne-stained marble flooring. I laughed softly as I wrote the check. Dom Perignon, it turns out, leaves quite a mark. Some lessons do. The newest scholarship recipient, Maria Santos, met me in my office last Friday. First in her family to go to college, 2 jobs, 3 siblings. When I handed her the letter, she started to cry. Mr. Johnson, she said, why would you do this for a stranger? I smiled. Because my wife believed every patient deserves a doctor who remembers what struggle feels like. She nodded through her tears. I'll never forget that. Make sure you don't, I said. If you're watching this story right now, wherever you are in the world, remember respect isn't something you earn through titles or wealth. It's something you give freely, or it isn't respect at all. The silence that followed Samuel's words felt heavier than any storm. Patricia stood frozen in the golden glow of the Christmas tree, its ornaments trembling slightly in the draft from the open door. The laughter that once filled the house now sounded like a memory that didn't belong to her anymore. The family looked between her and Samuel, unsure of what to say. David opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time, he saw his father not as a fragile man recovering from chemo, but as someone who had been quietly holding the family together while everyone else looked away. Samuel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply turned, his footsteps slow, measured the kind of walk that carries decades of disappointment and quiet resolve. The ring box still sat on the floor where Patricia had dropped it earlier. He knelt, picked it up gently, and brushed off the speck of dirt from the velvet. Then he turned to his son. One day, he said softly, you'll understand the cost of love, and what happens when you mock it. The front door closed behind him with a soft click, but its echo lingered. Patricia's face crumpled, a cocktail of anger and disbelief flickering through her expression. You're all just, she began, but no one was listening. Even the Christmas lights seemed dimmer now, as if ashamed of what they had just witnessed. Days passed, weeks even. The house remained decorated long after the season ended, but the spirit was gone. Patricia began to notice the silence, bills piling up. Tuition payments suddenly declined. University emails warning about pending balances. The college fund that had always been there, invisible yet certain, had vanished when she finally called the university. Her voice was tight with forced calm. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the administrator said. The donor withdrew the entire $200,000 endowment. Her hand trembled as she lowered the phone. "He wouldn't," she whispered, "but he had." Meanwhile, Samuel was in his workshop, sunlight spilling through the dusty windows. The same table where he once carved the ring now held a half-finished wooden box, intricate, patient work. The kind of thing that takes months, maybe years. His radio played faintly in the background, some old Christmas song about forgiveness and time. He smiled faintly. Not out of cruelty, but closure, sometimes. Revenge isn't about destruction, it's about reclamation. Taking back what was stolen. Dignity, peace, self. He didn't need applause or explanation. He had given enough. One winter morning, a letter arrived at Patricia's apartment. No return address, just her name, written in careful handwriting. Inside was a note, and the same ring she had mocked. The note read, "Gold tarnishes, character doesn't. Merry Christmas." There was no signature, but she didn't need one. Never mistake handmade for worthless, and never mistake silence for weakness. I studied his face, looking past the fear and panic for even a flicker of genuine remorse. "The Margaret Johnson Memorial Fund will continue," I told him. "It will help students who understand that compassion isn't conditional, students who don't confuse power with worth. You'll figure out how to become the doctor my wife thought you could be, but without her money holding you up." Dr. Hayes, his father, stepped forward, voice trembling with exhaustion. "Eddie, I want to apologize for my family's behavior tonight." "Your apology isn't necessary, doctor," I replied, closing my briefcase with a quiet click that echoed louder than any accusation. "Your son's choices are his own." The room seemed to exhale at once. 200 guests who had witnessed a man's moral collapse in real time. Champagne had dried in my hair, my suit stiff with it, but I no longer cared. I turned to Sarah. "Sweetheart, I love you. That will never change, no matter who you choose to build your life with." She stood, tears streaking her cheeks, and threw her arms around me. Her wedding dress brushed against my chest, the scent of flowers and sorrow clinging between us. "I love you too, Dad," she whispered, voice breaking. I turned back to Preston. His face was a ruined mascara, salt and regret. "The man who comforted my dying wife is still in there somewhere," I said. "Find him." Then I walked toward the grand exit, the weight of 200 silent eyes following me. Behind me, someone whispered, "He just ended the Groom." But it wasn't vengeance, it was revelation. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was cold and clean, carrying the hum of cicadas and the distant sound of laughter from people who hadn't yet learned life's cruel arithmetic. My phone buzzed before I even reached the car. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, the financial counselor, was first. Her tone was calm but heavy. "Eddie, I just heard from Marcus Thompson. Another scholarship revocation. Same pattern as before. Character clause violation. Public humiliation of the benefactor." She sighed. the kind of sigh only experience earns. I'll reach out to the family tomorrow. Emergency session, they'll need it. A second call lit up my screen. Janet Miller. Eddie, are you sure about this? Preston's residency review is automatic now. I'm certain, I said simply. The hospital board will want details. Tell them to call me Monday. I'll provide documentation. Let this stir the community, Janet. Maybe it's time some doctors remembered where compassion comes from. Then came the third call, unexpected, haunting. Eddie, said the warm, familiar voice of Dr. Martinez, the oncologist who had treated Margaret. I heard through the grapevine. Is it true? You've been funding medical scholarships. In her name, I said softly. There was a pause, then a sigh that carried years of memory. She'd be proud, Eddie, but heartbroken, too heartbroken at what happened tonight. She would have been disappointed in Preston, I said, but she'd understand why I did what I did. She would, Martinez agreed, and she'd be proud that you held your ground with grace. By Sunday morning, the story had grown wings. Someone at the wedding had filmed the entire confrontation. The video swept through the internet like wildfire. Groom humiliates father-in-law, then discovers he's been funding his entire medical career. 2.3 million views. Comments flooding in. This is why you treat everyone with respect. Imagine pouring champagne on the man who paid your tuition. The quiet dignity of this father is everything. But not everyone agreed. He destroyed a career over a wedding fight. Rich people's games, poor people's consequences. Both sides are wrong. I ignored them all. Social media validation wasn't the goal. It never was. By Monday, the fallout was official. Preston's residency suspended, pending investigation. The hospital moved quickly, citing character concerns incompatible with medical ethics. Dr. Hayes called that afternoon. His voice was thin, ragged. Eddie, please, is there any possibility of reversing this? None. He's seeing a counselor now. He's remorseful. I'm sure he is, I replied. $340,000 in debt has a way of inspiring reflection. He wants to apologize personally. I don't need his apology, I said. Sarah does. Silence. Then, she's staying with us. Preston's back in his old room. He's applying for research jobs, but his reputation's damaged. Reputations can be rebuilt, I said. Can they? He asked bitterly. This story is everywhere, Eddie. Even medical journals are writing about it. Ethics professors are turning it into coursework. That part surprised me. Within a week, I'd received invitations from 3 medical schools asking me to speak to their students about gratitude, humility, and the cost of forgetting where compassion begins. The Margaret Johnson Memorial Incident, as they called it, became mandatory reading in ethics classes. And something unexpected happened. The other scholarship recipients, doctors, residents, interns, began to reach out. Dr. Lisa Chen, one of the earliest recipients, called me from her pediatric oncology fellowship. Mr. Johnson, she said through tears, I never knew the scholarship came from someone who'd lived through loss. It means more than money ever could. Your character earned it, I told her. But my wife's sacrifice made it possible. I think about that every time I treat a child, she whispered. That, I said softly, is exactly what Margaret wanted. The ripple widened. City National Bank reported a 340% increase in memorial scholarship inquiries. Families inspired by one night's revelation, deciding to transform grief into opportunity. As for Preston, he found work in pharmaceutical research. The salary 60% less than his residency, but the labor honest, unglamorous, real. Dr. Rodriguez helped him arrange a 15-year repayment plan. Sarah filed for separation 6 weeks after the wedding, not because of debt, but because of truth. I keep thinking about that look, she told me over coffee one rainy afternoon. The way he poured that champagne. It wasn't nerves or alcohol. It was pleasure. He liked having power. Now he knows what it feels like to lose it. Maybe, I said quietly, that's not such a bad thing. 3 months later, Preston asked to meet. Not to beg, not to plead. He'd learned better. The research lab I'm in, he said, voice steady for the first time. We're developing treatments for pediatric cancers. I think about your wife every day, about how she trusted me once, and how I forgot what that meant. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but maybe the first step toward it. 6 months after the wedding, I revised the fund's rules. Every scholarship recipient now receives the full story. Margaret's battle, her death, the insurance money that built their future. They know that their benefactor isn't a millionaire in a penthouse, but a janitor who drives a Honda Civic, buys clearance ties, and believes kindness outlives wealth.